What's up everybody? I'm Coach Zach here at Critical Bench, and in this video I'll be sharing with you a functional stretching routine for your hips. We're going to be targeting 4 different areas of your hips: your hip flexors, your psoas muscle, your adductors, and your abductors. Now in this functional stretch routine, we'll be putting our body in these positions and then moving the body in the way that it's designed to move in all planes of motion. Flexion, extension, lateral right, lateral left, as well as rotation right and rotation left. Now what this is going to do is it's going to open up your body in a way that makes more sense, right? Our bodies are made to move in all different planes of motion. Stretching in this way will unlock your body in new and different ways than you might be used to. Let's get it. This first stretch, we're going to be working on our hip flexors. So first, you're going to assume a lunge position. Step one leg back. Now from this lunge position, I just want to make sure that you tuck your tailbone. Find that posterior pelvic tilt, right? A lot of times, because we have tight hip flexors, our body will compensate by really arching our low back, dumping the weight into our lumbar. We don't want that. Tuck your tailbone, sink down into the legs, keep this back leg straight. Now from here, just take a few breaths, right? Sink down into this, make sure that you're pelvic tilting. From here, you can bring your hands to your hips. We're going to work on flexion and extension of our hip while maintaining this position. So you can have a big arch in your spine, give yourself that anterior tilt, and then give yourself that posterior tilt. From the side, give yourself that anterior tilt, and then that posterior tilt. Tuck your tailbone. We'll just do this for maybe 8 reps. Keep working on straightening out this back leg, sinking down. It's a subtle movement, but moving your hips while in this lengthened position is really going to unlock some things. Right? So that's flexion extension. From here, we're going to work on our lateral. From here, we're going to work on our lateral side bending of the hips. Again, assume that position, hands on the hips, and you're just going to find some salsa hips, right? So from side to side, trying to move as much as you can, as much as your range of motion can take you. Again, keep that pelvic tilt, keep that glute slightly engaged, just from left to right while in this lengthened position. We're going to work on the last movement, which is rotation of the hips. So again, sink down into the legs, assume that position, pelvic tilt, hands on the hips. From here, this is a very subtle movement. You're going to rotate your hips to the right, so kind of open up the angle of your hips, and then close the angle of your hips. Imagine that it's a book. Open, and then close. All right, external rotation, internal rotation, while staying in this position. Boom. It's not a big movement, it's subtle. And for you, it might be even smaller. But just putting that intention in and working on it is how you can gain that flexibility. Next stretch, we're going to hit our psoas muscle. Familiar with the psoas muscle? It's a deep muscle that comes all the way from your thigh, runs all the way up and connects to your lumbar spine. It's very necessary to get into this muscle and open it up. So you're going to need an elevated surface, maybe a bench, maybe a box, anything at all. You're going to place one foot on top of it, right? From here, this leg that's still on the ground, you're going to internally rotate it. So you want your toes slightly turned in. Just going to hit the psoas a little bit more. And then from here, again, find that pelvic tilt. So tuck your tailbone and then sink down into it. And then just sit out here for a bit, take some deep breaths, let this lengthen. Maybe it's really intense for you, really tight. Deep breaths, really drive that heel down. From here, we're going to do the exact same thing we did before, moving our hips in all planes of motion. Starting with flexion, extension. So again, let your lower back arch and then tuck. Again, it's a subtle movement. So open and close, arch and tuck. All right, go for maybe 8 to 10 reps. Get that flexion extension movement in. Then we're going to do the lateral. Then we're going to do the lateral movements, right and left. So hands on the hips. And again, find that little salsa hips from left to right. All right, try not to move your shoulders. It's all in the hips. All right, get that lateral movement, really getting deep into this muscle. really kind of opening it up in different ways. Good. Again, maybe 8 to 10 reps. Then, rotation. Hands on the hips, just like we did before in that lunge position. You're going to open up the hips and then close the hips like a book. Open up the hips and then close the hips. So you're trying to take this hip bone further away from your knee, and you're trying to bring it closer to your knee. All right, rotating at the hips. Good. Make sure you do both sides. That's the psoas. Next, we're going to get into the adductors, the inner thighs. Same thing, you need a bench, a box, or any kind of elevated surface. You're going to place one foot on top of it. This time your hips are going to face forward, right? So foot on top, other foot. You can slightly point it in a little bit. And then from here again, find that pelvic tilt, kind of lean into that leg. So just do this a couple times, some deep breaths here. And then you're going to hold it. Once you find that point, hold it. And then we do the same thing. Flexion, extension. So again, arch the low back and then tuck your tailbone. Just holding in this position, moving our hips the way that they're designed to move. Right? So flexion, extension. Again, do about 8 to 10 reps. And we're going to do the lateral. So this is a little more tricky because this leg is lifted. So you're really going to have to sass the hip out to the side and then sass it back. So kind of moving the hips in this way. Right. Again, maybe 8 to 10 reps. Good. Sink back into it. And all we got left is a rotation. So you're going to open up the hips, see how much you can expand, and then bring it in. Open and bring it in. Open and bring it in. And again, maybe 8 to 10 reps. Just working on opening the hips and then bringing this hip bone closer towards your knee. That's the adductors. This last one, we're really going to get into the outer hip, the glute, the abductors, just the outside of the hip. Again, get a box, a bench, some kind of elevated surface, maybe even a table. You're going to bring one leg on top of it like you would in a pigeon pose. Bring that knee down and then scoot that other leg back. So you feel that right into the outside of this hip. Just sink down into it. You can kind of rock from side to side. Kind of just melt into this stretch from here. Just kind of melt into this stretch. And then from here, same thing. Flexion, extension. So you can use your hands to help brace yourself. Again, just working on arching the low back and then tucking your tailbone. Again, it's a subtle movement. These aren't big movements. Just the intention of moving our hips while we're in this stretch position is really going to do a lot of work. Good. And then from here, sink down, sink back in, and you're going to go from side to side. Again, lateral. This one. Really opening it up from side to side. Get that lateral movement of the hips. Nice. About 8 to 10 reps. And when we do rotation, 2 ways you can do this rotation. You can just have your hands on your hips and again work on opening and closing. But instead, I like on this one to use your arms to rotate. Make sure you're not just rotating at the spine, like not doing this, right? You want to also work on moving your hips. So internal, external. So your arms are following your hips. You notice my hips are moving with my arms. Internal and external. Again, about 8 to 10 reps, getting that rotation. And then from here, after that, before you come down, you can just kind of fold over the leg, maybe even walk your arms over and just melt. Some deep breaths here. Maybe about 30 seconds, sending the hip, melting it down. And then that's it. That's the external hip, the outer hip, and the glute. I hope you enjoyed this functional stretch routine for your hips. Just maybe incorporate this into your recovery days or your off days. Really get some more mobility and more function out of your hips. But before you go, I have a free report on why stretching will not make you flexible. Right? The conventional way of stretching, of static stretching, holding stretches, is not the most effective way to make your body more flexible, to open yourself up. There's better ways, just like the functional stretching routine in this video itself. So if you want that free report, go ahead and check out that pinned comment down below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and again, I'm Coach Zach here at Critical Bench. I'll see you next time. Yeah.